In the chamber this week, we're talking about RPGs, more specifically, top tips to enjoy the game better, here on Fandom Roulette. Hey guys, welcome back to Fandom Roulette. Cody here, solo today. Joe's still out with a bit of a head cold, and I'm starting to come down with stuff myself, so this episode is going to be a little shorter than your typical stuff, but it'll still be packed with stuff to talk about, so it'll definitely be a good listen. So, a little catching up. I had a solo session where I talked about games of 2017, where I talked about some games, some good, some bad. I got a little more in depth with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I'm going to not redact what I say, but update it a little bit. The gameplay is fun, but it still has that grind that will eventually be fixed with loot boxes, at least, according to people, over the internet and EA's, official statements. The loot boxes and the paid format will at some point come back either as it was or in some modified form. So while the game was good, and it's a shame that it's kind of locked behind loot boxes, it was fun, and if you're a fan and that stuff doesn't bother you, go ahead. But to me, unless I find it for a sale, I'm probably not going to pick it up. So that's kind of my little section. The nerdy stuff I've been doing is I've been still playing Persona 5, and it's still a hell of a ride. It's been a lot of fun. I still haven't, according to what I've read online, I still haven't even met the full cast yet. But yeah, it's been a good time. So I'm going to jump right into it. I wanted to make this episode because I feel that for a lot of people getting into or playing role-playing games, there is a sort of, for most people playing, I think there are some fundamental things that people don't talk about. I think maybe people might be either, it's common sense and they think that everyone should know it, which is kind of a fallacy in itself. It's not safe to assume that everybody understands how to communicate or at least play a role-playing game. And for those of us who've been playing it for a while, it's a nice refresher to kind of come back and remember why we enjoy this game and some things to enhance the situation. Whether you're on, and all these, I have 5 tips to make a better or more enjoyable role-playing session for you and your group. Whether you're the game master, whether you're the player, all of these apply to both sides of the table. So yeah, we're going to start with number 1, and it's kind of the big one. This one, I see a lot of problems online pretty regularly about how there are problems at the table, or I came to my first session and this guy was a real jerk, or I was playing with someone who's really mean to me and I don't know how to deal with the situation. Help. That seems to be a common place on the internet, is trying to figure out how to better enhance your situation with problem players, or maybe it's the game master who's a problem. And so step 1, communication. It's critical to enjoy a situation. You could be with the best of buds, or you could be with complete strangers. Communication, whether it's listening to the people who might have problems or speaking up, being able to be like, hey, I don't appreciate what you're doing, or hey, I don't know this rule, I want to do this thing, help me out. 9 times out of 10, bringing something up is going to enhance the situation. Communication is so important that I often run what's called a session 0, and you'll notice that we started Fandom Roulette on session 0, which is kind of a reference to the concept. Session 0, for those of you who don't know, or maybe know it as a different name, is kind of your backdrop story. You get 5 people, or however many people you have to come together to play this game. I run a session 0 personally to remind everybody and to familiarize people with how I want to play, what setting we're going to use, what kind of themes. I want to set down expectations so people aren't sideswiped by something that happens in game that I do. For instance, session 0, typically I like to talk about house rules that I do, because I have a few of them. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for quite a bit now, and I have come up with my own home rulings on certain things and have added to the experience with these things. So when I do a session 0 with whether it's new people or people that are coming back, I like to do it because not every game is going to be the same. I don't try to run the same theme of game, whether it's Monster of the Week style one-shots that kind of spring into something else, or my Thieves Guild where kind of anything goes, or my adventures where it's like, okay, I have a story here, I want you to be a part of the story, I want you to write with me, so some things are going to be off the table. Regardless of those, I like to let people know what they're getting into. So, we've got house rules, we've got how I want it, and this goes both ways. I like to run session 0, but session 0 is for the game master and the players. Players should come to these sessions with an idea of talking with the other people they're going to play with, because this is a group participation. So not just talking to your DM about what's allowed and what's not allowed, but talking to your players about what you're getting into. It's good to know as a player with the other players what your party members are going to be doing. So, and this will come up a lot where you'll get into session 1 and you realize very quickly that one of the characters is playing a bit of a loose cannon, and you're kind of unaware of that, and you're playing a goody two-shoes by the books kind of person, and it turns into this mess, and this could have been solved or at least talked about in session 0 so that you're not running into this issue where you're trying to control each other into doing the things you want to do. I think personally this is your best tactic for communication, is setting up a open-ended discussion, talking about your characters, the setting. As a DM, if I'm trying to run a serious kind of Game of Thrones fantasy setting, I don't want my characters to name themselves Farts McGoats or I Enjoy Pizza. Like that, they're silly names and there is a place for them, but if I'm trying to run something serious, not right now. So we did number 1, communication. This one's key, and it's kind of hard to keep going in depth with this because it's just talking to people. It's kind of building up the courage to be able to tell someone, hey, I don't like what you're doing, or hey, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. So yeah, we got communication. And then the second rule is come prepared. This kind of gets a little complicated, or there's a bit more meat to it from the game master side. You typically have to, whether or not you're doing a homebrew setting or some kind of book, you need to read the book. You need to know what your characters are going into, or be able to improvise when they do something that's not quite in the book. Or in your homebrew setting, you need to make NPCs. Typically, you want NPCs to be fleshed out. You don't want them to be cardboard cutouts. Hello, my name is Steve. How may I help you? Or you don't necessarily need voices for them or anything like that, but just having NPCs that the characters may enjoy. Maybe, who knows, maybe the bartender is a bit of an alcoholic, and if you talk nice with him, he'll give you a free beer or something like that. Having characters, and one of my tips for this, if they run into a character that I have not prepared, like say oh, there's a town guard who tells you to stay away from this area, and they're like, oh, well, let me talk to the guard. Sometimes I can put you on the spot, like, oh, I just kind of made the guard so that you guys would go away. Having a note card filled with names, or having a random name generator opened up on your laptop or your tablet, whatever you're working on, so that you can basically have a character outright, and then that's when people are like, oh, he had a name for him, he must kind of be important, and then you can kind of from there develop that character, write him down, make him important. And that goes again with the group storytelling, You're not always going to use the NPCs or the things that you've written. So being able to improvise in that situation, coming prepared with like a list of names, maybe you even have a list of different locations that they might want to visit. And then as a player, the same goes for you. The game master or the dungeon master has a lot of work ahead of them. They have to create stories, Not only are they the referee, but they're a storyteller who gets help from you guys. It's a collaborative storytelling effort. But for the most part, the DM has to create the story or create a situation for you. So being prepared as a player is a super bonus. Having, whether it's reading up a little bit of the rules, like I'm not saying you have to read the whole book, but maybe, look at your character sheet or look at your stuff. And if you're a newcomer, That's okay. You don't have to know all the rules right away, but being eager to learn the rules is also helpful. That's being prepared. And, having utensils or, character sheets, pens, pencils, whatever you use to write down. Dice would be preferable. I know most people usually carry around a big bag of dice. I know I do. But going to your local game store and picking up a dice for like $5 to $10 is the least you can do for the amount of prepper, especially if the Dungeon Master or the Game Master is hosting. There's a lot of stuff already on their plate. So being prepared yourself, I know personally, I've seen it on both sides. I've seen the Dungeon Master not prepared. I've come to sessions not prepared with my notes, and the notes crashed on my computer. So we had to do something a little different. And I've seen it on the other side. I've seen people come to games without character sheets or forget character sheets, and we have to spend extra time looking for those. And that can be frustrating for both the players and the Game Master, because that's time that could have been used playing. So coming prepared, maybe in another episode I'll talk more about, as the Dungeon Master, what I prepare for settings myself. That is a topic that probably could take its own 30 minutes to talk about. So we'll move on. So we have communication, big key. Coming prepared. This one, it's come excited. I see it happen a lot where people are coming to role-playing sessions and they've got something on their mind. They're upset about something. Maybe they're grumpy. They had a bad day at work, whatever. Take this time to be excited about the game. I know personally, if there are a few people at the table who are genuinely excited to play, it tends to be infectious and kind of take over everybody, whether it's the Dungeon Master as well, or just all the players. If you're not coming to these games excited, maybe that's a sign of something bigger that you probably should tackle. And if it's something in-game, like if the reason you are not coming excited to these role-playing games is because of what's going on in the game, communicate. Figure out what it is. Maybe the Game Master's a huge jerk and is kind of stomping on your spotlight, and he seems to be singling you out and you can't figure out why. Talk to him. Maybe he doesn't even realize he's doing it. Maybe he'll take a step back. There are so many things that could be going on, and maybe he or she might not even realize that something's going on. Communicate so that you can be excited. Nothing, for me anyways, in my games, nothing is more demoralizing than having a handful of people not being excited to play. It looks bad as at least for me as a GM. I'm always striving to be better at my craft, whether it's storytelling or whether it's making fun combat situations or fun puzzles or fun NPCs. I'm always looking to be better, and coming into a session where everyone's just like, oh man, this sucks, I really hate this, oh man, it's rough. It's not fun for most of the people at the table. And if you're having this situation on a regular occasion, I would say if you are upset or kind of grumpy to come to a role-playing session, after about 2 or 3 times, there might be a situation and you might want to, communicate with the people around you or try to figure out what's going on so that you can make this better for yourself. Because I know that when people are happy and people are excited, it can be infectious to the people around you, especially if you're good friends. It's more impactful there. And even with strangers, I've been in a whole room of strangers, but just by putting on a smile and wanting to talk to people, it changes the room. Come to an RPG session excited. You don't have to be 110%. I know that's asking a lot, especially if you've got long days of work and it's Friday night and you've just had a really terrible week and you're coming into it. Like, I'm not saying you need to put on a fake smile and you got to be like, ha ha ha, I'm so happy. Hey, just try to be excited to, even if it's not necessarily the game, you just like spending time with the people, and maybe you like to role play a little bit, or maybe you just want to roll some dice, you want to get some steam out, roll some nat 20s and just crit on some dragons. Like, find what it is that gets you excited about the RPG and kind of fuel that fire. So we have communicate, come prepared, be excited, and then this fourth one, I think this feels like common sense, but I feel like in this day and age, we kind of lose this. It's be polite on both sides, or a player being polite with people. And this comes with, and I'll tend to tie all these back to communication. The difference between doing something as a character or doing something as the player is very different, and it shows. If you are typically a really nice guy and you do something really mean to one of your party members, that shows, and you spend time building these characters. I know I tend to put at least 30 minutes to an hour building them, and then I usually like get attached to them because I want to like get in character. I want to be like them. So when you go out of your way to do something mean to the characters, that can seem kind of mean and, you know, directed towards the player and kind of differentiating. And that is simple as, if you want to do something like that, if you feel like it's in character to do something mean, just communicate that right off the bat. Be like, hey, Joe, we cool, but my character has a beef with you, so we're going to do a thing. I know this has happened before. I've had some really great sessions planned out where a character did something that was something that his character would have done, but it pissed off the entire party, and it kind of created this very hostile situation. But before it got too heated, we had to remind ourselves, like, this is in game, being polite, like, let's not swear at each other, and we'll hash this out in game. And then they had this crazy argument, and it was super fun to watch. It was almost like an episode of TV where a group of friends are having like a really bad time, and at the end of it, even though at some point things were said that people didn't like, we were all still friends at the end of it. So it's being polite. It's letting people know that, hey, my character's going to do something you might not like, or, hey, I'm going to have an argument with you. I just want you to know that this is totally in-game. This has got nothing to do with like a beef we have outside of the game. So being polite, and that's just one aspect of being polite. Being polite is coming to a session on time. You know, if everyone agrees to 7 p.m., don't show up at 7:45. That's rude. If you know that the DM puts a lot of effort into the games, maybe show a little bit of appreciation for it. I know my players specifically are very good about letting me know how much fun they have, and that's a real big like heartwarming thing when they tell me that they really liked a session. Or, hey, if you've got a little extra cash and you know that typically there's not like enough snacks or things like that, you know, buy some snacks. You know, go out to your local convenience store, buy a 2-liter of soda, a 2-liter of soda and some chips, and that'll really go a long way. And then on top of that, being polite, doing stuff like not hogging the spotlight, making character who's like, oh, I know this is going to be a huge thing for my character, and then once that thing is done, and maybe the other character wants to get a piece of that action, you know, letting them do it. It's not hard to be polite. It's about communicating. It's just remembering that you're all doing this as a game. It's all for fun. You're all collaborating with each other to create a really cool, whether it's a scene or a story, what have you. You're all trying to make it cool. So by kind of hogging the spotlight and making everything about you, it diminishes the effect of everyone else around you, and that's rude. So from here, I know we usually do a midsection, but this is a little past the midpoint, so this is kind of after the midsection. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Do-do-do. So if you want to talk to us, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can at fandomr_podcast. That is our Twitter handle. If you want to ask us questions, if you want to suggest topics that we talk about, whether it's role-playing games or history or video games, or even just kind of the grab bag stuff like movies, TV shows, etc., you can send us a personal message at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. We will try our damnedest to answer your questions, having an area at the end of a podcast where we can answer questions from the audience about things. Maybe we've said things that are confusing. I know we only have about 45 minutes to an hour to get across a topic, and sometimes we'll glance over something, so feel free to reach out to us in those two forms. If you're looking for news about Fandom Roulette, where we're going, what we're doing, you can find us at www.fandomroulette.com. You can also find us at iTunes at Fandom Roulette. Please give us a review, rate us, share us around, tell people about us. We're just starting out, so every little bit of help from our little community helps. You can also find our main source on SoundCloud, Fandom Roulette, and coming soon, We will have a Facebook. We're still discussing the logistics of YouTube, so that'll definitely be around the corner. But we will have a Facebook posted up, and we will try to blow that up as much as we can. So this is a little past the midsection. So we've gone through 4 of my 5 big tips. I've said them enough already. Most of them come back to communication. But number 5, and this is the hard one. This is the one that I feel a lot of people don't do, and they stick around those 1 through 4. They try to communicate. They try to come excited to these things, prepared. They try to be as polite as possible. But sometimes, and this is tip number 5, if you're not having fun, maybe it's time to let go of this group. Now, I know that sounds very pessimistic, but I don't mean this in the sense that, oh, as soon as one problem happens at the table, fucking book. That's not what I mean. I mean, if you have a problem with a player and he's maybe he or she is being a jerk and has just been taking it out on you for weeks, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to go talk to them. And then you say, hey, you know, I'm uncomfortable with the way you're treating me and my character. It feels like you're personally attacking me. Could you please stop? And sometimes, or hopefully most times, the people you're with would be considerate enough or polite, tip number 4, to be like, hey, I totally get it. I will cool my stuff. You're fine. Let's have a good time. But sometimes there are some people out there who just aren't going to take it. They're not gonna sit there and take what you say because they think you're blah, 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 or whatever. And sometimes it's just, if you've done everything you can to fix the situation and it doesn't fix itself, maybe it's time to find a new group. And I know that sounds scary. I know for a lot of people, I know for me, when I first started, it was very hard to, my first group that I DM'd was my fiance and a friend, and eventually we got done with our first campaign, and my fiance just wasn't into it anymore. She didn't want to do another campaign, and so then I had to look for other people, and so we searched around and eventually got something going. But I know it can be kind of scary to think, oh, well, these are the only people I play with. There are tons of options. If you are in an area with a game store, like a local game store, or maybe you're in school, maybe you're in high school, maybe you're in college, there are plenty of people who want to role play. All you got to do is put up a poster somewhere or talk to the establishment owner of that local game store. Be like, hey, I was looking to run some Dungeons and Dragons. Do you think I could do it here? They would be happy to help, because the more people that come to that game store, the more people that are going to potentially buy something from them, whether it's a drink or maybe they buy a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, if that's still a thing. Whatever it is, I'm sure they'd be glad to help. Or more often than not, those game stores are already doing stuff. I know with Dungeons and Dragons specifically, they have what's called Adventure League, which is basically their own kind of self-promotion system where they have like this kind of set rules, and it's kind of you jump in with a group of strangers and you just kind of play games. It's more based on the mechanics. It's more about combat rather than necessarily role-playing, but it is an area in which you can play Dungeons and Dragons. You don't necessarily need that group that's giving you grief. Also, there's online. You know, there are great systems online like Roll20 that will basically kind of get the ball rolling. Like, instead of having to be in front of everybody with a big bag of dice or a character sheet and pens and pencils, all you need is a microphone on your computer and Roll20, and you can find groups all over the place. Now, that comes with its own set of issues. There's a lot of strangers and stuff. But until you find, like, your perfect group, I mean, I've heard stories of people finding their groups online. I grew really close with a couple of people playing World of Warcraft, and I think the same situation still applies. Going online, searching for people, that's not a bad option. In fact, I think it's a great option. It opens up the world for playing with people you may have never met otherwise, all across the states or the country or the world. You can play with people all over the world. And to me, that's super awesome. I love that idea that you can hang out with someone, get their own different story on life and how they play. It's super cool. So again, if you're not having fun, if you feel like you often come to the table unprepared because you just don't, you're just there because my buddy's there, so I might as well go. Or if you're not excited and you're the grumpy one, like, all those things are going to show, and it's going to make for an awkward and not a great situation, not for, especially for you, because you don't even want to be there in the first place, but for everyone else around you. That kind of ho-hum, I'm mad at the situation is also infectious. It can kind of ruin a table, and so you would be doing yourself a disservice if you don't try to figure out what's wrong, communicate, figure out why you're kind of upset with the situation. And then if you find out that there's no way to fix it, these people are jerks, or they just see things differently than you do, and it comes to an impasse, like, leave. Go find a group at your local game store or college. I'm pretty sure that at any high school, if you put up a sign or a thing that said, hey, I want to play some Dungeons and Dragons, meet up here, I am sure you will find people who are also like-minded in that aspect and will want to play Dungeons and Dragons with you, or even just role-playing games. Maybe just make a club. If you're at high school or college or whatever, make a club. Just put up a sign, be like, hey, we want to play some role-playing games, we want to hang out and talk. Like, go do it, And I know for a lot of people, one of the other scary things, the reason that people don't leave tables when they should is, oh, well, none of us are game masters. None of us have done this before. And so if we lose this guy, we don't have a dungeon master and we lose our game. Well, I call on you. If you're in that boat right now and you hate the guy or girl who's kind of running the show, and you've talked to them a bajillion times and you've been nothing but nice to them, get out there and be a game master yourself, It's super fun. Personally, it's super rewarding. And once you've done it, at least for me, you can't stop. As much as I would love to be a player in a game soon, I love making content, creating situations, NPCs, puzzles, dungeons, you name it. It's super fun. And I'm sure those people out there who are just nervous, like, oh, well, I'm going to do it wrong. Like, don't worry about it, because if everyone in your group follows these 5 tips, they communicate, they come prepared, they're excited, and they're polite, you won't have to worry about if you did a poor job or you didn't remember a rule right or whatever. Like, they'll play with you and they'll keep you going. So, kind of to give kind of a summary, communicate, listen, and speak up. Session zeros are great for those dungeon masters or game masters who are new, or you've been doing it for a while and you want some extra tips. Session 0, starting a session with kind of getting to know who the players are going to play, what your house rules look like, what your setting looks like, whether it's serious or fun. Communication is critical in having a good time, because this is a role-playing game. You're going to have to do a little bit of talking, I'm afraid. The second one, come prepared. And this goes for both the DM and the player. The Dungeon Master, come prepared with NPCs, your dice, your notes for what's to happen next, etc., etc. Coming unprepared and it plays sloppy. It's hard to play a game when you don't have anything in front of you. So coming prepared, but also the players should also be prepared. They should have a yearning to understand their classes more. Maybe there's something that they found out earlier in the last game that they didn't know. Learning up on that. Bringing your character sheets, bringing your pencils and papers and notes and your dice, whatever you need to keep this going. You should be prepared. The third one, be excited. Have fun. This is a game. You're supposed to be having fun. If you're ever getting to the point where you're not excited about playing Dungeons and Dragons, or you dread doing the next session, that's where you should look at these other things and be like, what can I do to better this situation so that I am excited? 4, being polite. And this comes with communication, communicating with the players, making sure that people understand that there's going to be conflict. The great games come from conflict. So making sure that you communicate that, You know, oh, I'm not doing this to you, Joe, as a person. I'm doing this to your character, Twinkle D. And, you know, making sure you don't hog the spotlight, making sure you're just generally polite, showing up on time, maybe bringing something for the group, whether it's, you know, if you've got money, whether it's chips or a beverage, any of those things will do. Being polite is like the first way to get invited back. It creates great conversation. It creates great moments where otherwise people would avoid because they're like, oh, I'm too afraid to be mean to that person. I think there's a balance there. If you're upfront and tell them like, hey, I'm not being mean to you because I don't like you. I think my character would do this. It creates some really cool situations that you can get into. And then last but not least, if you've tried all 4 of these and you're just not having fun, maybe it's time to let this group go. Go find another group. There are plenty of places online and at your local game stores and schools and colleges to find a new group. And I would hope not. I think there is a role-playing game for everybody. But maybe this game just isn't your thing. Maybe you gotta look for something new. So guys, that's about it. Those are my top 5 ways to, you know, make your role-playing experience better on either side, whether you're the dungeon master or the player. I think these are some great tips for you to move forward. Feel free to reach out on our social media. I would love to talk to you guys about the stuff that I brought up, or maybe you've got your own top 5 or top 10 that you'd like to bring up. I would love to engage in a conversation about this because I do feel like the first step to a good role-playing game session, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or another game, are these. And if you feel like there might be another one, or maybe I didn't add enough to a certain topic, feel free to reach out. Like always, please feel free to contact us, and we'll see you next week. Stay super nerdy, guys.